Now let's talk about principled paradigm and success. No doubt success and principles and paradigm, they work hand in hand. As I earlier mentioned in the previous slides, no one ever lived beyond his or her scope of paradigm. And that as well has a major role to do with success. When it comes to success generally, we could classify it as primary success as well as secondary success. Primary success are usually based on principled paradigm, because achieving primary success doesn't interfere with the right of others, and that is where principle comes in. As we proceed, we're going to see the various principles which have always been contributing to primary success in nearly every areas of life. And those primary, when it comes to primary success, it often stands the test of time. But when it comes to secondary success, there are successes which are not based on principled paradigm. And achieving secondary success doesn't care about interfering with the rights of others. That's why in the classifications of paradigms, which we covered earlier on, we realize optimal paradigm has a major role to play when it comes to primary success. But when one lives from the perspective of secondary, from the perspective of concave or convex paradigm, one in one way or the other will by default be subjected to secondary success, which doesn't stand the test of time, or which in one way or the other can easily be sabotaged. But in situations whereby one develops the right principles, one would be able to attain primary success in a way that would as well stand the test of time. Let's have a look at the various paradigms or the various principles which have always played significant roles in contributing to primary success. There are a series of those principles. The first one has to do with the fairness principle. We as well have the golden rule principle. We as well have the service principle, the potential principle, the growth principle, as well as the patience principle. No doubt about the fact that these principles, when integrated into one's attribute, one would be able to utilize it in achieving primary success over a long period of time in a way that would benefit the person who already have these principles integrated in his or her attribute. Without wasting much, now let's take a look at those principles one after the other, so we'll be able to see how best we could utilize them in our day-to-day life and as well in our business interactions.